So yeah, I think we'll just get started here as people join in. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is the top 5 challenges of scaling an agency efficiently and then how to solve them. My name is Scott Strand, and I'm happy to be joined by Liz Adamson, who I'll introduce more in a moment. But first, before we get started, just wanted to go over some housekeeping items really quick. Today's session is going to be recorded, and the recording will be shared with you soon via email. Please use the Q&A section to submit questions for our panelists to answer at the end. And if you have any questions after the webinar, please feel free to reach out to us at marketerhire.com. We'd be happy to help. So in today's session, we'll be covering the following topics. First, we'll start off having Liz explain the rise of our agency agility and give us some context for the rest of the presentation. Next, Liz will list the top 5 challenges of scaling a team when you have limited resources. And then she'll walk you through the lessons she learned while dealing with these challenges and how she would deal with them today. Finally, Liz will give some closing remarks, and then we'll save some time at the end to answer questions. So without further ado, let me introduce Liz. Liz Adamson is an experienced agency leader in the e-commerce space with a focus on helping brands be successful on Amazon. In 2015, she founded Agility, a digital marketing agency specializing in helping brands and manufacturers launch and grow a profitable Amazon business. She built this agency up to triple-digit headcount before getting acquired by BuyBox Experts in 2020. And then since then, she's gone on to advise many other agencies and has leading roles at Nile Commerce and her other business, XPN. So thank you. Warm welcome. Thank you for joining us today, Liz.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I'll make one small correction that I'm sorry I didn't catch beforehand, but it was Agility was acquired by BuyBox Experts, and then we scaled into a triple-digit headcount. So I want to make sure that I give credit where credit's due.
Yes, perfect. But yeah, thank you for joining us. Excited to get into the content.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. So yeah, diving right in, Liz, just to kick us off, could you kind of give us a brief background of your career? Great to give the audience context about, how you got started, how that led to Agility, and then a few high-level details about the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into this field. My expertise is in Amazon marketing, and I got into it back in 2011. Joined a small retailer startup who was just starting to sell on the platform. We grew that into a $15 million business and a top 200 Amazon reseller. Around that same time, Amazon began launching different marketing tools, and that's where my passion and focus is. And so I launched my agency, Agility, in 2015, providing Amazon marketing services for sellers and brands on the Amazon platform. So that was fun. It kind of started as a very small consultancy at first. I started scaling it, BuyBox Experts knocked my door about 2020 as Agility was really just starting to scale fast. I joined BuyBox as the head of their advertising department, which was very new. Agility especially was in advertising, so that was part of the acquisition, was to bring myself and my team in, where we took that team from probably about 4 or 5 team members, and we scaled that very quickly up to 35 members. It was the fastest growing department at that agency for a couple years. Launched a couple new divisions within that. And then later I became president of BBE and oversaw that the 200 employees and contractors that worked with us to serve our clients. So it's been a fantastic ride from startup, where it was just me, all the way to, overseeing a larger agency.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and that's an interesting path forward there. I'm kind of curious too, just like as you started to scale that initial team, like going from 5 to 35 is no joke, big increase there. And I think a lot of our audience is like in similar positions of having a small company needing to eventually, having the need to scale for growth. Yeah. So once you kind of determined you were ready to start hiring and scaling that team quickly, can you talk and give us a brief overview of the top 5 challenges you immediately ran into?
Yeah, absolutely. So scaling is hard. I'll just lead with that. There's a lot of challenges that come with that, and I wanted to focus today on what is the largest cost of expanding an agency, and that's the people and the headcount. There's a lot going into there. So I've kind of distilled it into these top 5 challenges. How do you minimize that headcount cost as you start scaling? Because people are probably your most expensive. In most cases, your most expensive expense, your highest expense, I should say. Reducing all that busy work that comes with trying to hire. It's hard to hire. It's hard to vet and recruit and interview. And then once you've got the right person, optimizing that onboarding process, which again is no joke. And if you haven't done it before or haven't done it at scale, that can be a big time sucker, and it could be a loss of your investment if you don't do it right. The fourth thing was one thing that really I thought really hard about. My agency was built on my personal reputation, and I wanted to make sure that the work I was giving, the type of quality and work I was providing to my clients, the people I hired were doing the same thing. So the big question I asked myself is, how do I ensure this quality and my clients are thrilled with the result and feel like they're working with me? And then, last is, how do you do this at scale? How do you go from 5 to 35 to 200 in a cost efficient way, in a time efficient way, and replicate all these processes, wisely?
Yep. Yeah. That's definitely, I'm sure, challenges a lot of the audience can resonate with if they've tried hiring before. But yeah, great challenges to like really dive into. So would love to kind of like, if you don't mind breaking down how you go into a lot of and solving these big challenges, because, very, very important to solve and think about ahead of time.
Mhm.
And I'm sure, looking back, you might do things differently, looking back on it, how you would today. So yeah, just hoping you can like go into detail on each of these and kind of expand on what you do today, what's best practices, and what you'd suggest to the audience.
Yeah, and I'll lead off, before we dive into the details, I'll lead off answering that question by saying that, you've to figure out how to answer any challenge in your business. I've found that I've had a combination of resources, if you will, to help me address challenges. And that's everything from reading. I love to read. There's lots of great business authors out there. And I'd encourage you to, read Peter Drucker, read books like, Built to Last and Good to Great, and by Jim Collins. And so reading has been a good way for me to figure out how to solve these challenges. And the second piece that I've really relied on is networking with my peers, and attending, and part of that is attending webinars and podcasts and listening. How did other people do this? What mistakes did they make? What successes do they have? And what can I apply to my business? I wouldn't take anyone's solution kind of off the shelf and immediately apply it to yours. You might want to adapt it to yours, but you will get by immersing yourself in ideas from books and webinars and podcasts and colleagues, and then pulling everything together into your own solution that uniquely fits your business is how I approach that. But if we dive into kind of the first top challenge, which was minimizing headcount costs. That was, that's kind of problem number one as a startup, right? It's as a startup, you usually don't have a whole lot of cash flow. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing. It's how do I get these next 5 clients on board, so I can get revenue to pay for somebody. But if I don't have somebody there to take those 5 clients, how do I serve them? And so do I hire first? Do I get the clients first? How do I manage this cash flow, especially when hiring can be one of your top expenses? With, how do I handle benefits and payroll taxes? And, am I hiring out of state? What kind of laws and regulations do I need to deal with there? And so it can get very expensive, especially if you're, whether you're hiring remotely or in person. In person involves office space. Remotely requires maybe some additional, tax obligations or filing obligations and things like that. And so costs are a big part of headcount. So how do we minimize that? I'd start off by saying that, don't be afraid to think differently. The first thing the first solution I ran with was, well, who says I need a full-time hire? Why do I need to hire someone at, 40 hours a week when really I probably only have 10 to 15 hours right now? and I'd like that to scale. But I don't have the cash right now to pay someone full time. And what would they do full time? I don't have enough work for them. But I know I need to stop working 60-hour work weeks. So I need someone to come in and start helping me. And so fractional talent was just a boon for me, right? Being able to find fractional talent who were willing to come in, and either it was a second job for them, or maybe they were getting back into the workforce after a leave of some kind, or finding contractors who that's what they do. They have 3 or 4 or 5 clients, and they spend 5 to 10 to 15 hours on each client, and are ready to expand as needed in some cases. And so contractors was really my go-to. It minimized the payroll costs, right? I didn't have to worry about FICA taxes. I didn't worry about out-of-state filings. The contractors were used to working fractional part-time. And so my first 2 years, I really relied 100% on contractors. And then started hiring employees after that, after I had full-time work, after I wanted a little bit more stability and knew I liked this person, and things like that. And even going offshore to help minimize those costs. A lot of people get nervous about that. I know I was definitely nervous. When I joined BuyBox Experts, that's when I was first approached with the idea of, hey, we want you to build this advertising team. We need to minimize costs. We want you to look hard at international and offshore. And I thought, oh goodness, like, how is this going to work with time zones? And is there going to be a language barrier? And how do I vet their education level? And, if it's a different system than I'm used to in the US. But, it definitely took several interviews for me to kind of get used to what to watch for, what to ask, how to screen, the nuances in culture and things like that. But once we got that system down, my international people are my favorite people. We have people from Asia, from Europe, from the Philippines and South Pacific, and hardest workers I've ever, worked with. And they were used to working with U.S. contractors, U.S. employers. And so I was more scared than I should have been, if that makes sense. I was very pleasantly surprised and thrilled with the whole process. It just took me a little while to nail that part down on international contractors. But definitely was grateful that I explored that route and dove into it.
Yeah. A lot of great insight there. And I think, like, going back to a point where it's just like fractional talent can be so flexible. Like you mentioned, not needing someone full time, but there's also a lot of different businesses where, it's seasonality will change the requirements of how much work you need at one point. And full time can be such a big commitment, because even during those lulls or downtime, you still have full time hires requiring the same benefits, pay. That's something we see a lot, with just like being able to flex up and flex down as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, working in e-commerce as I do, Q4 is crazy, right? Being able to flex it for Q4 is a lifesaver for us.
Totally. Cool. So that's great. Let's move to the next challenge here.
Yeah. So you've decided, you've figured out how to manage your hiring costs, and now you're actually, diving in and recruiting and hiring. And I will say, as a, business owner, I have to wear a lot of hats. I wear the accountant hat, I've wore the COO hat, I've worn the sales hat and the HR hat, as well as the account management hat. Right. And I'll be frank, HR is probably one of my least favorite roles. It's just, and I mean that there's just a lot of work that goes into getting the job posting up. We posted a job posting. Gosh, we had a job posting up about 3-4 weeks ago. I got 200 applicants. Probably only half of them were even qualified. And that's just the way of the job market. People will throw their resumes at any listing they see, whether or not they're qualified. And so I get frustrated with processes like that. And so it was definitely hard, spending so much time reviewing applications. And then I had to learn. I learned through, I would say, trial and error on the interview process too. I made some bad hires. They sounded great in the interview, and then I hired them, and then 3 months later we're like, sorry, we got to start over again, which is a huge productivity problem, right? If you're hiring, training, and then having to let someone go. And so a lot of busy work, a lot of thought needs to go into this. And to help you get there, you've got to start from the job description. You can't just say, oh, I need an account manager, I'm going to go start interviewing people. You've got to, list out, and I think most people know this, list out the responsibilities. What do you want them to do every day? Do you want them to think? Do you want them to work on a project? Do you want them to be client facing, or are they back office, or is it mostly data entry? Do they have to, when I say think, I mean, like, do they need to be a strategic thinker? Do they have to problem solve? So you've got to get really clear with yourself on what is it I want them to do. And then from that, derive what skills do they need to have to do that. I'm probably not going to hire, with some exceptions, I've had exceptions, but I'm probably not going to hire, someone with more of a copywriter background to be a data analyst, right? And so outline what kind of skills and what kind of job experience those people need to be successful in the role that you just wrote. That will give you clarity on having to sort through those resumes really quickly. You'll know exactly what to look for. And the copywriter who applied for the data analyst job, oh, you're gone, and just be ruthless. And then in the interview, that then leads to your interview questions. What kind of questions do you ask to assess those skills? I would go beyond skills too, and make sure you're evaluating attitude and culture alignment. That I can train almost anyone on a skill but if they don't have like the core talent of loving numbers, if I'm hiring a data analyst, go back to that example. If they don't have a core talent of loving numbers, loving spreadsheets, loving problem solving, it doesn't matter whether or not they know how to use Excel, right? And so you got to get out of do they know how to use Excel? Yes, no, great. I mean, yes, they do know how to use it, but I could probably teach them as long as they love numbers and love data analysis. Do they have the other things I look for are passion and curiosity? I remember, I'll give you a fun example. I was hiring an advertising manager, and this was offshore, and in fact, most of my team was offshore at this point, but I was recruiting and screening for an advertising manager. He had all the skills. Every question I asked him about, how do you optimize? How do you, think about this? What metrics are you using? He bang, bang, bang. He knocked it out of the park. I got to my cultural questions. And one of my favorite questions to ask to kind of gauge their passion for the job is, why do you choose to work in this field? What has led you to choose and to continue to pursue a career in the field of Amazon advertising? This applicant, no joke, looked at me and said, oh, it's the easiest job I've ever had. I had a job before and it was so hard. And I didn't, and this one, I just sit on my couch all day in my pajamas and I do the job. Guess what? I didn't hire him. I was just like, really? Because it's easy. Like, the answers I loved was, oh, I love problem solving. I love working with the clients. I love seeing sales go up after those people I hire. The guy who's just like, oh, this is by far the easiest job I've ever done. I can do it in my sleep. So think about those questions. You got to think about those questions and dig into the personality of the people as well as the skills, and make sure it's someone that you would trust to put in front of a client or do whatever job it is you want them to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of that takes time. It's like, you really do have to fill in for the whole recruiting process, which, can be hard until people do it, I think, to like really wrap their head around how much goes into that. 200 applications, having to say no to the 100, having to get that down to eventually just one, tons of busy work associated with that, which just, ultimately is taking time off of your table to do other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Moving on to the next one, optimizing onboarding processes. You mentioned was a challenge.
Yeah. So that's, you found the one, you had a great interview, you did all your cultural questions, they're a perfect fit for you. Now, even though they might be an expert in their field, how do you get them used to your processes, the way you do things, your client base, the tools and software you use, the people they're going to work with? There's a long list of, and I've been part of organizations, and I'll be honest, when I first joined Buybox, we were not good at onboarding. Like, we just kind of hired and said, here's your manager, here's your client list, we'll see you later. And it worked, but it was kind of a hard experience for our clients who were like, I asked this person this question, they didn't know the answer, just whatever. So we, I really started scaling that company, it was, okay, we need to decide, we've got our job description, we know what we want them to do. Now for the onboarding process, let's make a list of all the tools they need to do their job. make sure they have logins, make sure they know how to use them, make sure they get some training. Let's make a list of who are the people that they're going to work with. What if they need help with, like I'll go back to hiring advertising managers. What if they need someone from creative to do a custom banner for them? Who do they talk to? What's the process? How do they kick that off? Who's their list of clients? And rather than just sitting them on the call with them and meeting them for the first time, can we gather all the background information on those clients, give them the story of this is the account you're taking over, this is what's happened, this is who managed it, these are their goals, these are their struggles. Just having if you can sit down and outline, here's the 50 things I need them to know, or the 20 things, or whatever it is. And even create like a guide of, what we did is we put it into kind of an employee handbook type thing where it was like with a table of contents that said, and it modeled kind of the job description. So here's the 10 things you're responsible for. And here's some links to those resources and people. So you can learn how to do that. You can learn how do I log into this platform? What's the URL even? And how do I get a login? And has IT even set it up? And so getting this core document that we would hand to the manager and to the employee saying, okay, your first week, this is your job, is to go through this manual of sorts, and run through it, make sure you have any questions, and get them asked, and you're basically studying. It's like you're in school for the first week. And that to me has been the fastest way to get them onboarded, is put them in school for the first week, design that curriculum, design it around the job description, and make sure they've got access to everything they need. And you've got to have, in order to do some of that too, and we'll get to this, I think, on the next topic, but you've got to have your own kind of standard operating procedures in place. So if you don't know how you do the job, how are you going to train your person how to do the job? Like, do you even know what you expect them to do other than go take care of the client? Like, have you gotten more specific than that? Like, what does it mean? What do you expect? Do you expect them to get back to the client within 24 hours? What about on holidays and vacations? What about during Cyber 5, where, most people are taking the weekend off, but not my e-commerce people. That's our biggest shopping season. So do you even know what your expectations are and how you want them to do the job? And I don't mean micromanaging. I mean like expectations, like, again, it gets back to my client in 24 hours, please, just little things like that. So we'll talk a little bit more about SOPs, but you've got to have SOPs around this onboarding process and spend that first week just kind of getting them up to speed.
Totally. And yeah, this is one of those kind of unavoidable challenges of just, working with other people, making sure they're all up to speed, all on the same page, and really onboarding. So definitely good to have process around that. The side benefit of having having to put your process down on paper is I feel like it often helps you kind of understand and manage your own work that you might not have taken the time to do before. But yep, definitely. Cool. Yeah. Let's hop into ensuring quality.
Yeah. And this dovetails a little bit nicely with the onboarding process, right? And as I mentioned before, before I made hire number one, my biggest concern was I need to protect my personal reputation. I need to protect the reputation of my company. How do I ensure that quality? How do I ensure that my clients get a repeatable experience, a dependable experience? They shouldn't, that was the largest challenge. That one of the biggest challenge in a large agency is, by nature, you'll have some employee turnover, and an employee leaves, they were client facing, another employee slots in to fill their space with that client. All of a sudden, the biggest complaint we would get during that process would be, oh, employee number one did it this way. You're doing it completely different. Do you know what you're doing? Does that mean you don't know what you're doing? Has the company not trained you? Or was employee number one not doing it right in the first place? And now do I trust this company if I don't think their employees are all on the same page? So it's about this consistency across. Again, I'm not a believer in micromanaging. I'm not going to tell you what to say to your client or how you need to analyze things, but you've got to have a certain layer of consistency so that as clients interact with different people in your company, they are getting a consistent experience and aren't surprised at, oh, well, you're doing it weird. That's not what I'm used to. And so, again, and starting again, I love how everything really does start with that job description. So start with that job description. Okay, now if you expect them to interact with clients, let's break that down. Is it a weekly meeting? Is it a bi-weekly meeting? Is it a, do we do quarterly reviews? How do we format those quarterly reviews? Is there a template that I use so that everyone gets the same experience in the quarterly review? What's the standard? What's the expectation for responding to clients? What do I do if I'm out of office, and the client can't reach me? Like, how do I make sure I've got backup in place? And so starting with that job description, going through, okay, what are the, how do I want the client to experience this? And what are the things that I need to put in place that employee A and employee B are doing it in a similar fashion, with their own flavor, but in a similar fashion, So it's hard work. I'll say it's hard work to put these SOPs together, but it is so worth it. It will improve employee morale if you do it right and don't cross the line into micromanaging. But it will improve morale because they don't feel like they're lost on an island. It will improve the client experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting because especially as an agency type of business, like I hadn't really thought. I was thinking like, oh yeah, you can hire high quality, talent and get skilled talent. But yeah, if you're not kind of like ensuring a consistent, like almost quality, like format and template, that could lead to, a very kind of like, ooh, we're a different business to different clients, which you'd want to avoid. Yeah, that's interesting. Cool. And wrapping it up here with the challenges, you had mentioned scalable team structure.
Yeah, and everything I think a lot of what I've talked to really leads into this is, going from 5 employees to 35 to 200 employees. You have to be able to scale that quality. You have to be able to scale the processes you've built into the job description. You've got to be able to, you also need to understand when not to hire, right? I've had experiences where, we have some sort of problem in the company that we want to address or challenge we're facing. And I've had people say in meetings, oh, well, let's just hire a manager of such and such to take care of this. Okay, great. But did we just, it's a common response. Let's throw a headcount on it. Let's hire someone to fix this problem. Well, that's an expensive way to fix it because you can become very bloated. And we did that. We got really bloated as an agency after a while because we kept hiring people to solve problems. And because it was a new position that we hadn't thought out very carefully, we're just solving a problem. We didn't define it well. We didn't hire the right person. And so we ended up firing them 6 months later. Or we ended up hiring so many managers to manage processes. All of a sudden we were very top heavy, which gets very expensive because that's a higher salary, right, than your individual contributors. And so scaling, and if you go through this process I outlined outlining your SOPs and how do you serve the client and what is your product, and even for non-client facing businesses, what is the product you're selling? How do you make it? How do you deliver it? How do you serve it? You can kind of start to map out, okay, what happens? And I'm a planner. I love to plan. I've got this 5-year plan. This is what my company looks like. And that's helpful because you can go, okay, what happens when I get to 10 customers? What happens when I get to 20? What happens when I get to 50? Map out that process of scaling and double check your costs. So do I really need 50 people to serve 50 clients? No, I really don't. So how do I serve 50 clients with 20 people? What kind of processes do I need in place to do that efficiently? One of my favorite levers is technology. Okay. Technology can be a lifesaver using it right. I'm sure we've all used like AI, like ChatGPT, and used wrong. I definitely get so many hallucinations. It's a joke. I asked it a question about a blog post once and it made the answer completely up. But I do believe in a blend of using technology effectively and efficiently combined with human talent and interaction. And I had a really interesting conversation with a product manager, a software product manager a couple of weeks ago. We talked about this idea of scaling a team and doing it responsibly. And he said for him, the generative AI, while it does have, it's not 100% reliable, if you can engineer the right prompts, he was able to hire one developer who created these AI prompts to do the job of 10 coders, if that makes sense. So now he's got one developer using AI to do the same output as 10 coders, people coders who would have had to, he would have had to hire. And so how can you use technology like AI? And it's not the right fit for everything, but are there repetitive tasks that technology, AI, any kind of software can do for you, so that you don't have to hire 5 more people to do that? In my industry, it's advertising. I use a lot of advertising tech that will, we blend our advertising optimization, where about 80% of the optimization is done using automation and technology and AI. And then 20% is human interaction, where we're reviewing, we're quality checking, or using a custom system for a particular goal. But blending that technology and people, I don't have to hire as many people. And it's cheaper to use the tech than to hire more headcount. So definitely look at technology. Definitely look at ways to outsource those repetitive tasks to contractors, to VAs, to software platforms, to AI, whatever. And that will help you scale in a way that's sustainable and not bloated, where that's how layoffs happen, right? We've been hearing about layoffs for the last 2 years. People scale too fast. They hire all these people. Now they have to fire them all because they went too fast. So make a plan, make a hiring plan, make sure you can afford it, and then figure out how to minimize that headcount using the tools that are around you.
Yep. Yeah, that's really good suggestions, just because I think we've all been, in companies where you can see kind of the waste of busy work. And there's lots of tools, whether it's just like simple project management tools or, generative AI, but lots of ways to kind of like reduce the busy work so you can kind of focus on the strategic work. We recently had a webinar about using AI specifically in marketing, but there's a lot of use cases for it. And it's like, it's not going to be replacing like, the working with clients, thinking strategically, but it can really help you, just like eliminate those repetitive, busy work kind of tasks.
Absolutely.
Really nicely. So, yep.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, those are the 5 challenges. We kind of got these lessons like pulled from each of those, but just if you wanted to summarize kind of the big lessons learned, you want to go over those again?
Yeah. Just a really quick summary. What we talked about. I mean, really, it's about. I summary part of it is just think differently. Don't be afraid of contract hires or offshore hires or finding a new way to do something. Getting that clarity in your roles. You should never hire someone unless you know exactly what you need them to do. Otherwise, you're just going to hire the wrong person.
Yeah.
And then creating those SOPs, right? Both for the hiring process, for the onboarding process, and for after you've got that employee onboarded, so you can ensure your quality. And then, we just finished talking about technology. I mean, just technology is so amazing, and there's so many choices out there. If you don't like one particular platform, guess what? There's 10 more that probably do. Each technology platform I've used has their own unique strength and weakness. So find the one that works for you. Just because I use Asana doesn't mean you're going to like it. Maybe you like Monday, like find something that works for you and your company. But yeah, that would be kind of the 4 kind of overall takeaways, I would say.
Totally. Great. And then, with that, I think we've kind of talked and we've seen a lot of how Liz was able to grow her headcount to triple digits, continue her business growth with more people. So any final conclusions? We kind of did lessons learned right there, but any final conclusions, words of advice you want to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, I would say just in general, for any business owner, entrepreneur, you've got to be willing to test and learn to find out what works best for your business. Like I said at the beginning, what works best for, your friend down the street who has an insanely profitable marketing agency might not work well for you and your niche and your work habits and style and things like that. But, take those ideas from people around you, from books, from webinars, from colleagues, and test them in ways that will not impact your business catastrophically if you fail, because you will fail. And so you can create these tests of, I'm going to test using this and see if it works. And I can design the test where if I fail, my business won't fail. And if I do fail, also, I will learn from that failure. I will fail quickly. It will be a 6-week test. It will fail. I might lose a little bit of business, but I won't lose my whole business. And I will learn from that and we'll move on. So kind of my bottom line is test and learn. Don't be afraid of failure. You can design those tests so that you can fail safely and then learn from that and iterate.
Yep. That's great advice, I think, for any business. Yep. Well, great. Just also wanted to mention, if you're looking to scale up a team without kind of incurring these high costs of full-time salaried workers, like Liz mentioned, like with fractional talent, Marketer Hire allows you to hire the top 3% of marketing talent kind of on your schedule, sticking to a flexible budget, things like that. And, Marketer Hire goes through a strict process to accept only the best and kind of match them with the right clients based on their size, industry, experience, and more. So if you're interested in learning about how to hire freelancers and eliminate a lot of that like excessive recruiting busy work that Liz was talking about, feel free to visit marketerhire.com today to kind of see how we hire. But with that kind of concludes our presentation. If you have to leave, thank you for joining us today. But if you can stick around, we just have a couple questions here that we'll do our best to answer over the next couple minutes. So Liz, one of the questions we received, how do you build a positive team culture when many team members are virtual, working from different places? Curious how you've done that.
Yeah, I love this question because I think that's one of the top deterrents to people being willing to hire remote, hire international, hire the fractional talent, is they worry about, and in-office culture is special. I've spent 10 years of my career working in office. I spent 10 years of my career working remotely. I've done both worlds. They both have pros and cons and benefits and drawbacks and so on and so forth. And you do need to find what works for your company. But I will say that, this team culture, when done thoughtfully, you can have a very strong remote team culture. And so at BuyBox, we had our US team. We had in fact, more than half our company was based in the Philippines. We had a very strong Filipino team, and then we had team members spread across Europe and then Southern Asia as well. And that was one of the biggest things that we try to attack is how do we make people feel like they are part of this company, even though I don't interact with them physically. There's no water cooler talk. I don't get to go lunch with them. I can't go get a drink after work. We had to be very deliberate. It wasn't just letting business flow my only interaction was meetings and email. We would create first Friday fun day or something. And so, and the time zones are fun too. So you have to pick, we would do like a late Friday morning just to accommodate time zones. It's like late Friday morning, we're going to do an hour of trivia or Jeopardy, or there's tons of really cool online games that you can research. Just go and Google online games for remote teams. And we would just play a quick game, or some of our managers got really into it and they would do an employee spotlight, or just, I can't even remember half of them, but you can do a lot of Googling and a lot of research on how do I do these cultural moments with online teams. But we were very deliberate in once a month we would come together and just have fun. There was not working, and you can do that online. There's lots of ways to do that. We learned that through COVID too, right? How many of you, exactly, suddenly discovered how to Zoom with your families during COVID. So do stuff like that. And then, it is important to bring people in person every once in a while. So can you, fly them in once a year? And if you can't fly the entire company in, can you, like I said, we had kind of three major we had teams in the Philippines. They would do in-person events together. Every once in a while, a leader would fly out to join them. In the US, have in-person teams. If you've got a team in Europe, let them have an in-person annual event. It doesn't have to be the whole company, but get your people together who live close to each other. And in your hiring, you can think about that. Oh, I want to hire people in Eastern Europe, and then I'll plan for some sort of retreat where they can all get together in Poland and whatever. So that can help minimize your costs. But lots of things you can do. You just have to be very intentional about it, think through it, and be creative in how you engage online to try to mimic that in-person office feel.
Totally. Yeah. And I think as someone who's worked remotely and with many different time zones since 2020, I think also when it just comes to work and work communication too, it can be very helpful to just make sure everyone's very adept at using the communication tools that you have available, whether that's Slack or you're communicating over a project management tool. Kind of just making sure everyone's up to date on all the different things that are going on, whether that's for a certain project, certain task, or even more like a company related thing at a high level. I feel like that can be really nice, and to just be, realizing the time of day that it is for other people, and
Mhm.
kind of accommodating that communication accordingly. I find that to be really team building. There's a sign of respect for like all of the different time changes and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yep,
Communication is key. Remote work does fall apart without very clear communication.
yep,
So that's very critical. We won't go into further than that, but that could be a whole other
yep,
webinar.
yep. Totally. Awesome. Yeah, there's another question just about offshore employees, kind of the benefits of using them. You've talked about that at length in this webinar, but yeah, some of your biggest like pros for having offshore employees. Do you want to talk
Yeah,
about?
yeah. It's, quite frankly, financial, right? US is one of the more expensive countries to hire employees in. And so we have, especially if you're hiring remote, why not hire offshore? And I do see it going both ways. I mean, not only does the company save some dollars, but I also see myself as helping an individual in another country who to have an opportunity to work, to maybe make a slightly higher salary than maybe what they're used to there. And we're very thoughtful about what kind of salaries we pay, and making sure that it's appropriate for that area of the world, but rewarding them for having to work the weird hours that come with working with a US based company where they might have to work a night shift frequently. And so we pay well, but it's still a cost savings for us. And so financial is definitely, the financial incentive is huge. But I would say the other benefit that I loved in working with offshore talent was the diversity of ideas and opinions and experiences and cultures and everything. There was a little bit of a learning curve to learn how to work with some of the cultures, and Americans are one way and Asians are another, and Europeans might be another. Just a way of communicating and talking and problem solving. But I loved the diversity. I am a firm believer that you will problem solve better if you have a team of diverse people with the diverse experiences and diverse ideas. You may not go with any one person's idea, but what happens is you get this melting pot of ideas,
Mhm.
and you get a better result.
Yeah.
And so I have just loved having that. And it's even from a personal standpoint, I've loved to getting to know other cultures. I've loved learning about the different holidays and religions and practices. And it's just enriched my own personal life. And so that's just my own, personal 2 cents. But on the company level, everyone, like I said, half our company was international, more than half the company was international. And people loved it,
Yeah.
loved getting to interact with people from different parts of the world.
Yeah. That's my experience as well. It's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's the questions we had. And as we're coming up on time, I just wanted to thank you all again for joining us today and sticking with us till the end. And thank you, Liz, for joining us and lending your time and expertise.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And if anyone has further questions or want to learn more about hiring freelancers through Marketer Hire, please just contact us at marketerhire.com. And yeah, see you later. Thanks, everyone.